just a short video showing what SOMA is all about. All right, so let's see. We are ecstatic to announce that we have over 270 registered medical students, physicians, prospective students, and medical educators that have decided to join us today. As advocates of our schools and our patients, we hope that the next few minutes can be an opportunity to celebrate the progress of osteopathic education. It is our duty, however, to continue to push the boundaries of equity in our education to ensure that we are trained to reach every patient. Again, thank you to everyone for attending, and I will be handing it off to our representatives from each school, starting with Nicole, SOMA's president at PCOM.
Hi, everybody. My name is Nicole. I am the chapter leader for PCOM SOMA in Philadelphia, not the Georgia campus. So we were kind of talking about each of the diversity initiatives that are at each of our osteopathic medical schools and what we could be doing better. So at PCOM, I apologize if some of you already know about this program, or if you're implementing it in your school, that's great. We have a cultural competency program. And basically, you could read the description on the slide if you'd like. It's just to give you a general idea. Students are kind of expected to go to different cultural competency speakers who come to our campus. There are like talks, there are education activities through all the programs at PCOM. So each chapter leader or president of different clubs, for example, SGA, SOMA, we have a PCOM Pride Club. They are all in charge of kind of coming up with different activities for the students to engage in. And then you get points based on what you attend and how active you are in learning. And students will receive a certificate if they get a certain amount of points per year. So it's a good way to kind of encourage students to get involved and learn a little bit more about each of our programs. So for one thing that we kind of want to do this year is we are upping the amount of activities that you have to attend to actually get the actual certification. And it changes based on how active you are involved. So some events, you know, you can put yourself on Zoom and you can turn a camera off and you're not necessarily engaging as much, but for the activities that kind of have a lot more discussion and there's more, you know, facilitated like talks and people are engaging, I think you get more credit for attending that particular event. So that's what we're working on this year. We're kind of changing it up a little bit from previous years to kind of get students to actually be a little bit more involved in each of the discussions. A new program that was just implemented is called Pipeline. So we reach out over the summer. Students are allowed to volunteer with other students from high schools and colleges that are minorities that are kind of interested in the STEM field. So what happens is a lot of all the programs at PCOM, so the DO class, the PA class, psychology students, they all kind of come together and talk to the different minority students that come to our campus. And for like a week or however long the program is that they do, they talk about how they can make themselves better candidates for STEM fields in the future and learn about things that they might be interested in. So that's one. Those are two things that we're working on now. And then, yeah, so another newly implemented program at PCOM is Safe Space. So they launched different like activities, group safe spaces for the LGBTQ community. So basically for people who are struggling with coming out or talking to their family about their sexual orientation, that's what this program is for. So a lot of different students come together and kind of help their peers with that, which is really awesome. And that's also a new program. And one of the things I just wanted to highlight is I think that a lot of the students at PCOM are doing a good job talking to our administration and trying to facilitate those difficult conversations. So I think that that is something we can definitely work on, implementing a little bit more education in our actual curriculum. And I think that's something that a lot of the PCOM students are kind of trying to facilitate now. So we're hoping that SOMA can facilitate those conversations and also bring in speakers who can educate us a little bit more about that. And that's all I have for PCOM.
Okay, right. So my name is Meher Ahmed. I am a second-year student at New York Institute of Tech, College of Osteopathic Medicine here in Old Westbury. So I wanted to discuss the diversity initiatives at our school. So basically over the summer, our dean put together work groups in 6 different areas. And you can see them listed here, but just to go through them real quickly, we had a group focus on faculty and staff recruitment and retention, admission student team. We had one group looking at teaching materials that I was a part of and also Scott was a part of. We also had another group looking at the simulation centers, print and web materials, as well as another group who was supposed to review the campus climate, and another group developed a ground round series. And essentially each of these groups is targeting different aspects of like what it takes to bring diversity and inclusion to the forefront of any institution. So it was nice to see that each of these working groups was led by a faculty in addition to a series of students who were interested in participating. So, you know, our dean gave us about like a 45-day deadline to come up with possible solutions that could work in a short-term span as well as a long-term span. And at the end of that 45-day mark, we all met together, each committee met together and basically presented their ideas. And the dean basically took everything that we said and created this COM Inclusion and Diversity Committee. Some aspects of this committee will, I think, be also funded, which is great because that basically means that there will be longevity in our solutions. So the membership of this committee will be the chairs of all task forces. There's going to be a representative from our NYT Inclusion and Diversity Committee, Dr. Brian Harper, as well as Dr. Sonia Rivera Martinez. She is a professor here and physician who is basically in charge of all free clinics. We have an academic affairs representative, Dr. Amanda Deal, as well as Dr. Nicole Wadsworth, who's our administrative representative for this committee. We also will have SGA representation from both campuses. So it is great because we can also have our campus in Jonesboro involved in these initiatives. And basically the goal of this committee will be to review the mission statement and the vision statement of our school. We're going to implement implicit bias training for faculty and staff. There will be a peer support group for students. There will be a faculty and staff reward system. There will also be an expansion of resources housed by the library, and the library will also be putting forth a summer reading program for incoming students. And just to touch on like my experience with these task force groups, like Scott and I, we were involved in the curriculum teaching materials group, and our group basically took a pretty detailed look at, you know, the lecture materials that we have as well as our lab materials, and we came up with a few solutions that will be implemented. So this expansion of resources housed by the library that you see here, that was actually one solution that every single group had come up with together. So then of course that's something that the dean is going to push for now. And as far as the teaching materials group goes, we had proposed looking at patient cases and making sure we're not perpetuating stereotypes in them. We wanted to include objectives that, you know, encourage the facilitators for each small group to ask our students questions that need to be asked in order to like engage our students into active discussion. And we also like pushed for a checklist, and this checklist is essentially making sure faculty are held accountable for the types of materials they will, you know, distribute to the school. And it's a way for administration to basically make sure that the faculty are up to date in the information they're presenting, and to basically it's like a framework for them also, so like they can just check off if they miss something, like making sure that the images are balanced, like having a great like an equal representation of cases and the types of cases that like the types of people that you present in your cases. So that's just some of the work that we were doing in our teaching materials group. And I believe the other groups have come up with like various solutions, and it all culminated into forming this inclusion and diversity committee. So that's what's happening here at NYIT.
Hi, everybody. My name is student Dr. Melvin Ways, and I'm going to be presenting on behalf of Rowan University School of Osteopathic Medicine. It's a privilege to be here with you all today. I'm eager to hear everybody's diversity initiatives and to share mine as well. So our first big one that we want to share, and we're really proud of it this year, is that we're hosting the 2020 Racism in Medicine Conference, and this is anti-racism. This isn't promoting racism, to get the name straight. So since 2015, obviously us and a couple other schools in the tri-state area have collaborated to make this happen. It's a completely student-run and sanctioned event. Administration is allowed to participate at our discretion. We've proudly run it student-based, even down to the funding. The registration link is here. I'm sure several of you here probably know about it, but what we do at this conference is we break into smaller groups. We actually discuss on a face-to-face level some of the issues that we might be facing at our own school and initiatives that we might be having at our own school. So it's kind of a small discussion like this, where we can really intimately get to know one another and some of the issues that go on in our community. And it's really good just to have that face value. We had several surveys at our school. We do have a curriculum based around microaggressions and implicit bias. It's part of our training. It's been incorporated for the last 3 years, and it's really something that we continuously work on. And one of the big feedbacks that was positive was the small group sessions. A lot of people saw that they got a lot of that good experience and learning across when you were able to, sit like we are right now and really talk to people and have that conversation, because these are hard discussions and people can tend to fade out when it's a big room full of strangers. So another thing that's brand new is our R1 SOMA Black Collective. I'm proud to say that I'm also a part of that. I'm the secretary, I'm the public relations and media representative for that. So what we do is we're pretty much representing a need for improved experiences in medical education for Black students predominantly, but also any historically underrepresented minority. And what this means is that we saw deficits at the school and we proposed solutions, especially for those that might have had pipeline support where it has been brought up in the educational system that suddenly disappears in medical school. That was one of our big initiatives. And we also put a list of other things that we felt like could have been improved. And some of those things I'm going to show you in this presentation a little later. So it's pretty cool. Another thing is that our STUCO, our student council, is in charge of doing a diversity survey. I'm the liaison of diversity for our student council. So I'm going to be conducting a student body survey with all of our diversity groups, from JOMA, the Jewish student organizations, the Christian student organizations, all of our LGBTQ organizations. Any diversity student group that's on our campus will be sending a leader to sit down with me and conduct a survey so that every student in the campus who participates will feel like they have a voice, or at least have been heard. And even if you're not in a student club, you can come and talk to me directly. So this is something that I like, because I don't think a lot of other schools are doing this, and it'll help give our new diversity director something to work with, which you can see here. One thing that all of our diversity initiatives pushed for, all of our campus clubs pushed for, was a new diversity director. We had one for a couple of years, and then the position was put on a freeze. And what this diversity director is a person of contact that us students can go to and voice our concerns. And they would also be, anonymously report systems, and their office was a place where we can go and report about any discretions, or even if we had good ideas, like the Racism in Medicine Conference. So this is really good, and we actually had a school-wide participation where everyone was able to see the final 3 candidates interview and give their input through a Qualtrics survey about which candidate that they thought interviewed best and would fit our mission. And so we're really excited about that, because that shows that administration works at a very close level. Again, like the Black Collective, we work very closely with administration. We just met with the dean and the provost this past Wednesday, and they take every single issue that we mentioned very seriously, and they're actually allocating space for us as a school organization, and looking forward to doing this survey so that they can see how they can empower other organizations to make their voice heard on campus. Idea Council is another great diversity student council organization where they pretty much autonomously run any diversity initiatives that they want to. They have a monthly safe space meetings where we have our physicians come down and talk about any issues on campus, whether it be mental health or physician suicide, any types of different issues that we want to talk about are mentioned at this safe space, and it's a place where you can do that. We've been doing that about 2 or 3 years now. It's student run, and our diversity week is in October. We'll probably be having some open forums like this for you guys to join. So definitely email our SOMA people or stay on our Instagram. And then our last thing is that we are a SOM, R1 SOM is a HCOP grant holder. That's a Health Careers Opportunity Program. So we are federally funded to create a pipeline from high school to undergraduate, even our master's school, and to bring underrepresented minorities and people of historically disadvantaged educational backgrounds into the medical school. And we have various, I'm actually a part of this where I mentor high school students and teach them problem-based learning because I'm a PBL student, and give them confidence at approaching college level sciences using something that they might not know, like problem-based learning. And we actually published research, it was pretty successful. So I'm really happy to mention that HCOP is not only a federal grant, but it works for our school at a grassroots level. So thank you guys for your time, and I really appreciate it.
Hi everyone, my name is Somia. I'm the education chair at SOMA and the chair of the LGBTQ club. So our current goals to promote diversity and inclusion at LECOM just includes more education and an open dialogue. So first, we recognize moving forward, it's important to incorporate an intersectional medical education. For us, that means we can't talk about racism without talking about sexism, homophobia, and transphobia. We cannot and must not separate these issues as they're not mutually exclusive. SOMA and the Health and Wellness Club is planning on collaborating together to create a journal club that is available to all students. In these clubs, we're going to discuss social medicine literature such as racism and the impact of policing on Black and African American people, immigration and Hispanic health, and so on. Secondly, we are planning on creating an interdisciplinary panel with physicians, social workers, psychologists, patient advocates, and activists to discuss issues regarding LGBTQIA health and race. In the future, we hope to create an anti-racism curriculum for incoming first-year students. Also, we hope to incorporate a class for our history and physical course that dedicates a couple hours to creating an open dialogue on how biases from our implicit association test can impact the care we give as future physicians. While these goals are lofty, we hope that we, with adequate support and interest, we repair the serious lack of medical education and of the health of Black, Indigenous, and people of color. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Maeve, she, her pronouns. I'm a second year at Unicom, and I'm one of the co-chairs of the Equity, Diversity, Advancement Committee. So that's EDAC for short. And we're just a group of students that collaborate with faculty and staff. I'm working on a lot of initiatives that many of you all have mentioned. So it's really great to hear that you all are working on similar things, because I know a lot of us doing this work, it gets tiring after a while, especially when students are advocating for this. And sometimes we're getting support from faculty. I know we have a few really great faculty advocates, but I know that can be a huge challenge, is getting the faculty and the docs we're working with to buy in and really value this work as something we need to learn. So I'm happy to meet all of you, and you're all, it's great. It's just inspiring to hear what you're all working on. So just short and sweet, some things that we're working on, a lot of curriculum work. We just implemented 2 new, we've been calling them cultural competency classes, always a work in progress there on terminology, but I'm working with Latinx populations, Latino, Latina, Latinx, Muslim patients as well, and the LGBTQIA group. So I think Rowan, I think it was Melvin, I think you mentioned the small group dynamic, like that super helps students doing those breakout sessions, you know, just having time to have those kind of trickier, like might be more difficult conversations for some people. So we find those small groups are really helpful, and I'm looking forward to see how those adapt over Zoom. I'm hoping we can pull them off this year again. And we're also working on an exemptions form. That's something I think we often have to think about in the DO world, especially when we're you know, hands-on. So this is something we implemented for our clinical curriculum. So just, it's a form students can fill out. It's super interpretive on how they can set boundaries for their body, on how things are practiced on them. So just, you know, basic consent stuff. It can apply to trauma, it can apply to religious modesty, you know, however you want to interpret it. So that's something we started new this year, and I'm looking forward to see how that goes. So that's something else we've been working on. No, I'll keep it short and sweet, but thanks. It's great to meet you all, and I'll get myself out there.
All right, without further ado, I know this is the moment we've been waiting for. Our speaker, Malone, is about to speak. He's with us today. So Malone Mukwende is a 20-year-old medical student from London, England. Originally born in Zimbabwe, he immigrated to the UK at around the age of 2 and is now a medical student, just like almost all of us, but at St. George's University in London. While a student, he saw a lack of education in clinical signs in Black and brown skin. And rather than waiting for change, he decided to do something about it. So he and two of his professors, or tutors as they're known over in England, created a handbook to address this. And right now it's currently available to publish online. It's online, working with some publishers. I'll post the link in a little bit. And since this has been announced, he's seen international recognition from places such as USA Today to Good Morning America to Upworthy, and internationally in ITV, news sources in Australia, Canada, and around the world. When not studying, which we all know can take up a lot of time, he enjoys photography. He's seen some of his photography featured in Vogue magazine, fashion, and supports his favorite football club, Arsenal, which I must add, has also seen some great success, just as Malone has. And it's so great to have you here. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to Malone for a little presentation, and then we will open it up. We'll have some questions. And as we've got some that you guys submitted, if you have any more, please write them in the chat, and we'll take a look if you don't seem to hear your questions being answered. I'd love to have everyone file in, but right now we have over 100 people here, and it can get a little chaotic. So, like I said, if you have questions, just please feel free to write them in the chat, and we'll try to get to them. So, without that, I turn it over to Malone. Thank you for being here.
Good afternoon. I think that's the time where you guys are. It's evening time in the UK right now. I'm really honored to be able to speak to you guys here today. Me and Scott actually spoke about this event a few months ago, so it's been a long time in the works, so it's great to be able to see it finally come to fruition. So like Emily did an amazing introduction, my name is Malone Mukwende. I am a third-year medical student now at St. George's University of London. I'm sure many of you might have heard about the work that I've been doing with Mind the Gap, which is a clinical handbook of signs and symptoms in Black and brown skin. I've actually got a presentation for you, so I will just share my screen and then we can get into it. And like Emily said, I'm more than welcome for you guys to just drop questions in the chat as we go. I think it'll be easier to do that. Okay, is this visible?
You're good. We can see it. If you want to hit present, you can also do that.
Okay, brilliant.
Is you good?
So, like I said, today we're going to be discussing some of the current problems which exist, why Mind the Gap is important, Mind the Gap and partnerships, essentially. So to first start off, this is my first slide. I think this is a slide which basically just illustrates why there is such a big need for this work. So I will talk through each of the pictures individually. So we start at the top left here. Black patients half as likely to receive pain medication as white patients, study finds. Some of these beliefs and racial biases, which we're still seeing today, some of them actually stem from the times of slavery. So this was some ideologies and beliefs that people had many years ago, and we can see how they've continued to transpire down generations, because there isn't a biological reason as to why that study should even find those results. But it's unfortunate that in 2020, there is still studies which are showing that people believe that. The little girl in the middle picture is a girl, her name was Victoria Climby. This was an almost safeguarding and negligence issue that happened in the UK in the early 2000s. So the little girl, she was being abused by her parents at home. And as a result of the abuse, they would hit her, burn her. So she had scars on her body. So then she presented to hospital with these scars on her body, and doctors diagnosed it as scabies. And then they sent her home saying that, that she has scabies, when these were signs of abuse and signs of negligence.
She was abused by her parents, and they presented to her at a hospital, and then misdiagnosed her as having scabies.
Oh, sorry, I think someone else was speaking. I wasn't sure. But she was, so as I was saying, she was diagnosed with scabies, and the hospital potentially could have played a part in saving her life, because if they had noticed that it was actually abuse earlier on, maybe she could have got the correct help from social services and the police and different institutions. Unfortunately, she lost her life. She did present to hospital again, and doctors were then aware that actually this might not be scabies and it might be signs of abuse. However, by this time, you could argue that it was too late. The picture in the top right, Black women 5 times more likely to die during childbirth. I know that that is the figure for the UK. I'm not entirely sure what it is for the US, but I know it's something similar. So these studies usually control for all other factors such as comorbidities, just all healthcare events leading up to the time of birth, but it still found that Black women are being more likely to die, which is this Black women being 5 times more likely to die will also link to the top left picture, because people argue that they're more likely to die because nurses and other healthcare practitioners believe that Black people have thicker skin, less likely to feel pain, less likely to be able to call out for the pain medication, and that a lot of the time that they're exaggerating their pain. And the worst thing about that stat in the top right is it's nothing new. That statistic has been there for the past 40, 50 years. And it feels like every year as we go along, we just keep hearing the same thing keep happening again, which is so unfortunate. In the bottom left, and in fact, the bottom 2 pictures, left and center, this is something that the whole world has seen with their own 2 eyes because it's so recent. Black people 4 times more likely to die from COVID-19 in the UK. I know that this was very similar to the global figures as well. And this, many people want to argue that this is due to XYZ. However, the one thing that we never really talk about in these conversations is that potentially they may have died because doctors were not seeing their signs early enough. They were not detecting these signs when they needed to be detected. So then they will, by the time a Black person presents with COVID, the COVID symptoms, it was already too late, or they were already further along in the disease progression. The bottom right picture, there is another stat which exists in the UK, that Black males specifically are 4 times more likely to be sectioned under the Mental Health Act. So what that means is they're more likely to be diagnosed with mental health conditions such as schizophrenia and then placed into mental hospitals, when a lot of the time, people and organizations in the UK have argued that sometimes it's not because they're mental, they're just almost misunderstood because we always use white to be the norm. So then everything else from there is other. So before we even see these patients, their scale of judgment is already skewed and it's not the same playing field. So that's where that's where that headline comes from. Also, moving on, this was actual advice which was given by the Royal College of Pediatrics in the UK. So this is a red warning for advice to parents for babies in coronavirus, and most of this is helpful. However, there is certain descriptors which have been used, such as, is the patient going blue around the lips? And of course, it says it's red and you need to go and call 999, or I think in America that translates to 911 or 112. I'm not sure what your emergency phone number is, but of course, you can appreciate that on the darker the skin of the baby, it's not going to be as obvious to see that. And even if you're becoming pale, sometimes it may not be obvious to see that so quickly the darker your skin gets. So how entirely useful was this advice to everyone? It did work, of course, for some people. However, for everyone, it's not inclusive of everyone because some people are getting left out. So the past 2 slides, sorry, I have basically illustrated some of the current problems which exist within the system. Now I'm going to talk about some of the current problems that I had with Mind the Gap. So one of the biggest barriers to Mind the Gap was the fact that the pictures don't seem to exist on the internet. I'm sure amongst us, the people who have searched for these images on the internet, it's not as easy as typing in psoriasis on white skin, because you'll get 1,000 images on Google. However, even if you put psoriasis on black skin, you still will not get images on darker skins, essentially. So it's not as simple. And given that we live in a very internet generation, you would almost expect the images just to be readily accessible. So therefore, I had to go to loads of different sources to almost source the information. And even in this, I was still struggling to find it, even though I was actively seeking the information. One thing that I found was a lot of information was trapped in academic journals. And what I mean by this is I had to scroll through academic papers, which were like 25 pages long, just to look for pictures or some information about what we should be doing on this topic. And I personally am a person who believes that you can have all the information in the world. However, if the people that need the information are not able to get the information, then how valuable is that information that you have? And I think a lot of the time, academic journals are not accessible to members of the population. To the average person, they probably won't understand half of the stuff that's going on in there. So I was like, it's so important that we make Mind the Gap as accessible as can be, as in every single person needs to be able to have access and be able to read it. It doesn't matter about where you are, or like, oh, only if you're medical students, you'll understand the terminology which is going on in there. Another issue that we had was consent for images, because of course we cannot just take people's medical images off the internet and do what we want with them. A lot of the images that I was finding were posted many years ago. For the older people in the room, it's like the MySpace generation. So this is tracing those people down where it was so hard and so difficult. Of course, it's understandable. Like the email address I have today in 2020 probably won't be the one I have in 2040. So a lot of the pictures that we found, we actually couldn't use them for the book. I've already spoke about the Google images. In the UK, our NHS is our National Health Service. So the way healthcare works in the UK is completely different to the US. So healthcare is a public thing in the UK, so we don't actually have to pay for healthcare. The NHS have a website which illustrates how certain conditions present on how certain conditions present. So symptoms, treatment, causes, just a whole lot in a very easy to read, very simple language. However, on analysis of that whole website, there is 1,007 conditions, and there wasn't a single page on the website which featured a range of different skin tones on their imagery. And a lot of the images were based on white skin, but it's important to appreciate that these conditions won't always present the same. So a bit about my journey thus far. I undertook a staff student partnership at my university, which was almost a collaboration with the university for me to work on a project. It's a bit similar to some of the work that you guys are doing with your SOMAs and things like, I'm not sure which university mentioned it. I think it was Rowan University or R1 SOMA. The thing that you're working with faculty for, like stuff like the Black Collective, is almost similar along those lines. So our project actually started in November, but I always write December because sometimes the dates get a bit confusing to actually determine the proper start point. We finished the first edition at the end of May 2020, and I posted a social media post on the 18th of June 2020, and since then it has been seen over 100 million times. I've had my work featured in ITV, the BBC, Sky News. These are all UK-based sources. However, for what American audience, what you guys would understand, it's been featured on Fox News, ABC News, Disney TV, Good Morning America, USA Today. I can't think of the other organizations. Oh, NBC. Just a whole load of different news sources in America, which has been really great to see that people are picking it up and people can understand that there is a need for this work and we need to continue to propel that voice and that need even further. Currently, thus far, to my knowledge, I know it's been taken up by 15 institutions in the UK to add to their official reading list for their universities. It's also been taken up by the ambulance service in the UK. So they will be using this to train paramedics and to give to paramedics who can use it even whilst at work to just help with their clinical practice. It's also available to the Royal College of Nursing in the UK. So this work is not only confined to medicine and medical students, because at the end of the day, we work as a big, massive team to help patients as a whole. We as future doctors and some doctors on the Zoom, if they are present, we can all appreciate that everyone's efforts all together. So paramedics, doctors, nurses, physios, occupational therapists, everybody works together to essentially deliver the same goal. So it's so important that our work can be accessible by all these different groups. And it's great to see that they are starting to take it on board. For those of you who haven't seen Mind the Gap as of yet, these are some screenshots from some of the work. So we went with the format of putting the pictures and then having descriptors, and we also quoted the sources so people can also go and look at the pictures from the original source. It's important for Mind the Gap. We wanted to make sure that we give almost like the most common presentations and diseases, because we struggled to find pictures. So we almost had to change our strategy to make it the most common. And then we will allow for other rarer diseases to be inserted into Mind the Gap in the second edition. So Mind the Gap is more than just a handbook. Mind the Gap, in my own words, Mind the Gap is more than just a handbook, it's a movement for change. And I knew that if we just give people a handbook, in my opinion, it doesn't entirely solve the problem, because you can be given a book, but whether you read it or not is a completely different issue. I'm sure many of us, even growing up, we had so many book recommendations that we were given, but did we actually read the books? It's a different question. So I went on to create a website which is called blackandbrownskin.co.uk, which we aim to be an online database of images on black and brown skin. At this moment in time, we're still collecting those images. And we hope to see it grow by the end of the year. The website will feature categories such as head and neck, chest, abdomen, lower limb, and upper limb. I will share my website. I will share my screen to show you the website after the presentation, because I don't want it to mess up, because sometimes there's technical difficulties when you're trying to jump between different screens. So these are just a few screenshots from the website, but I will show you the website in its entirety at the end. So like I just aforementioned, we couldn't just give people a handbook and expect them to change their ways or to change stuff. So with the limitations of COVID, we ran a training session, which was to a small cohort of 27 medical students who were between their third year and their final year of medicine. Medicine in the UK is a 5-year course, so that's third year, fourth year, and fifth year. And before the training, we could see that 71% of students, they were not confident in describing how pallor presents on black and brown skin. And pallor essentially is just going pale, and it's indicative of many signs such as anemia or just lack of oxygenation, really. But however, after the training session, it was clear that 66% agreed now they could strongly describe how this presents. I just want you guys to take a moment in your heads right now to almost understand and appreciate the severity of that problem that we had before this training session, that 71% of third to final year medical students could not identify something simple as pallor on darker skin. And imagine the consequences that has, especially considering that when we carried out this training, some of those people in the room were medical students who are now qualified doctors as we speak. So it's important that we are advocating for this work, because students have gone all their 5 years through medical school, and right at the end, they cannot detect how someone goes pale. 99% of students strongly agreed that they felt more confident in creating a more inclusive environment. Of course, Mind the Gap is tackling the issue of almost race in medicine. However, there is a lot of other issues, like some of you guys have mentioned earlier on in this talk, about how we need to make medicine and healthcare as a whole more inclusive from the point of medical school. And 99% strongly agree that they could inform the lead tutor or lead professor over in America if material did not appear to be inclusive. So one of the most important things from Mind the Gap is we appreciated that we were just 3 individuals. To have a long-lasting, sustainable change, it's so important that we almost empower a lot of people behind us to be able to make the changes in their institutions, because at the end of the day, we don't see what goes on in other institutions. So what might work at St. George's might not work at, I don't know, your universities in the US. So it was so important that we could almost empower them to put them in a position where they are able to call it out and they're able to speak about it confidently and to highlight to people why there is a need for the work. This is a slide to just illustrate how you guys can help with Mind the Gap. The work doesn't stop at Mind the Gap. It's so important that everyone around the world is able to have access to it, because it might save a life today, it might save a life tomorrow. So one of the ways that you can support is by supporting the website, which is blackandbrounskin.co.uk. I will, as I mentioned, I will show you how this website works. We want the work to be embedded into curricula across a range of different healthcare courses in the UK and globally as well. I can see that some universities in the US are starting to take this on board. To my knowledge, I know the University of Philadelphia and the University of Alabama, they are taking the work on board and changing their curricula as we speak. It's so important to keep raising the agenda in different forums. I think too many times people have thought that, oh, Mind the Gap ties into Black Lives Matter. Mind the Gap was almost trending, or it was just a trendy topic of 2020, when, as I showed you, this work started before 2020. So it's important to appreciate that it's not a trend. I think if we run ourselves down the trap of saying that it's a trend, it will end up doing a disservice to some of the patients who will need this work in many years to come, because they were not ill at the time of the trend. So I think it's so important if you can please all continue to share with your peers and your colleagues and everyone you work with. And also it's really positive to see how the work that you guys are doing over in the US to change your curricula to make it more inclusive. So that's really great to see. This is probably one of the most, one of my favorite things that has come about from Mind the Gap thus far. So in the UK, we are, even our government system is a lot different to the US. However, this was a discussion which was held in Parliament, so which was held in the most senior governmental body in the UK, which is the House of Lords. And it was actually mentioned about how the UK and different medical governing organizations are trying to tackle ethnic diversity in healthcare, because I think as a whole, I can't remember the stat off the top of my head, but ethnic minority students are starting to increase their representation at medical school. However, the curriculum doesn't reflect this. So it's so important that they mentioned it in the House of Lords, because like the final sentence says, are the government going to act on that? Unfortunately, at this moment in time, we haven't seen the government act on that. However, I hope that because the conversation was had in Parliament, we can start to accelerate that need for change. And to finish off, I've included this slide. It's almost a testimony of what people have been saying around the world. I think one thing you guys will love is this statement, which is, we need this in US med schools. We need this as continuing education courses for healthcare professionals. This will save lives. And it's, of course, I can see that you guys are doing this in the US. The other things are some patients just discussing how they're being treated by healthcare. And I think I added this slide in just to almost illustrate to you that this is not a problem which is confined to the UK or confined to the US. This is a global problem. So many people around the world have been advocating and have been screaming out about this topic for many years. However, it almost feels as if it's been swept under the rug. I think for me, the most shocking thing to come about from Mind the Gap was speaking to students over in Africa. And they were telling me that they too in Africa are being taught from textbooks which have white skin as the majority, even though majority of their population over there does not have white skin. So they were like, there's that barrier, and it almost ties in. These are some of the legacies of colonialism, which are still in place to this day. That concludes my talk. I hope, actually, I need to show you guys the website. So this concludes the PowerPoint, and now we will move on to the website very briefly. So I will share that screen now. Is it visible?
No.
Ooh.
You're good now.
Okay, so our slogan is not only minding the gap, but bridging it too. So I'll drop the link in the chat so that people can read this in their own time. I think the most important part, oh, my bad. The most important part of the work, of course, is this page, which is Mind the Gap, where if you haven't already, you'll be able to access and read the work. But however, my favorite part of the website is this ways to help. So we are continually updating our site with images. And at the moment, we're going through a phase of just collecting as many images as we can before uploading them all onto the site. So of course, we have a consent form so that people can fill the necessary consent forms and know what they're signing up to, because we don't want to almost exploit anyone. However, and this is to also make sure that it's their pictures who is the owner. Alternatively, if you're not able to give pictures, some people have stories which have been silenced for many years. This is the page where we allow people to share their stories as a blog post, and we will be also updating that at the same time as when we post the images on Mind the Gap on the website. We hope to start posting our first images this month, so it won't be too long before those images are shared on the website. I will copy and paste this so that I can put it in the chat. And oh, Emily's already put it in the chat. But thank you very much. Thank you all for listening, and it was great to speak to you today.
Are you okay to answer some questions, Malone?
100%.
We had some questions. Some people, we had people turn them in whenever they signed up. So our first question is, how can we as medical students advocate for patients when we see racial microaggressions in clinical settings during medical school?
I think to answer that question, it's so important to almost acknowledge that when you're a medical student, you still have enough power to speak out about some of these things. I know one thing that I have felt in the past is that I'm almost too inferior to even speak out about it, which has led me to almost keep quiet at points. I think it's so important to have a way within your universities or within your groups that you can also report these racial incidents back, because sometimes it's not to patients, but it's also you as students. I think at the moment in the UK, they've started to introduce a racial charter so students can report harassment and report when they see these things, because as things stood like a few months ago in the UK, there actually wasn't a way that you could report if you see a racial incident on placement. And it was unfortunate because it will always raise the question then, are we allowing this racism to continue? Because if the patient says they don't want to see you because, I don't know, you're a Hispanic doctor, or you're a Black doctor, or you're an Indian doctor, a lot of the time what would happen is they'll just go and get the doctor that they want. So it would raise the questions is, are we endorsing that racism from the patients and allowing it to continue? However, with the reporting system, I feel like slowly but surely we can start to dismantle some of these barriers in healthcare at the moment.
Our next question is, how can we make a plan to implement this vital learning in all medical school programs? And how as students can we be advocates for implementing diversity in our learning and training process?
Sorry, can you repeat that? It dropped.
How can we make a plan to implement this vital learning in all medical school programs? And how as students can we be advocates for implementing diversity in our learning and training process?
So I think unfortunately, ideally this should be something that faculties and the institution should be tackling. However, I feel like sometimes these things take too long, and there's so many processes and so many people that need to be spoken to go through in order to be able to address this change. As students, I think the answer to a lot of the problems are some of these organizations which you guys have set up, and attending things like this, which you guys have all done today. I think it's so important that as a student voice and as a collective that we are powerful in numbers, and like Mind the Gap has shown a lot of institutions in the UK that there needs to be a change. I think one thing that's so important as well is when you guys are making your action plans, you set timescales and you set almost goals which need to be met, because in my experience, I've sat through a lot of meetings where people are like, oh, we're going to do this and we're going to do this and we're going to do this. However, nothing almost gets done because you almost get overwhelmed by the list of jobs that you have to do. So I think it's also like so important to see action and to see it with like timescales in mind. Of course, I think one thing to appreciate as students is that we are students. So you've still got to focus on your degree at the end of the day. Hence, I say it's important to be powerful in numbers. So within your groups, collectively, hopefully none of you will burn out as a result of the work.
So what would you say is the most interesting feedback you've received about this book?
Oh, is that music coming from my computer? Okay. I think the most interesting feedback, I think the one thing that almost struck me and almost highlighted the severity of this problem was I got a message from a film company, and they were telling me that they've struggled for many years to do special effects on darker skinned people in film because they didn't know how it presented, and there was a lack of images. So that could be like, I don't know, a scene where someone gets burnt or something. And a lot of the time they said that the special effects was so many years behind too. So it's interesting to see that although the issue I tackled was very in my head, it was an issue only in healthcare. However, Mind the Gap has kind of unearthed so many other problems which are aligned to it.
What would you say was the most difficult aspect or barrier when completing this?
One of the most difficult things, I think, was almost getting people to accept that I know that I can do this work. A lot of the time people will tell me, oh, don't bother doing it until you qualify, wait until you become an actual doctor before you start doing this thing. Or saying stuff such as, there isn't such a need for this work because doctors know how to do this every day. And unfortunately, I could not see the answers. I could only see questions all across the board. And I was like, I'm always open to learning and I'm always willing to hear new suggestions. Maybe it's me that's being narrow-minded. However, no matter where I would go and I would ask questions, I couldn't find the answers and nobody could tell me answers. So I knew that I had to do something about it. And it's almost this battle within yourself. And as a medical student, I don't know if this exists in the US. However, in the UK, there's almost this social hierarchy of medicine. So as a medical student, you tend to be quite near the bottom. And of course, consultants sit right at the top. So while I'm at the bottom of this social hierarchy, I would also question myself, like, who am I to question the people at the top? However, when I would ask the people at the top for the answers, I was not finding answers. So I knew that I had to do something about it.
And going off of that, how would you describe that writing this book has changed your life personally?
I think that's like a really big statement. To me, I'm still like personally and even amongst my friends and everything. And at university, I'm still the same person I was before. I think it's changed my life in the sense that I'm able to speak to loads of wonderful people like you guys today. and I'm able to travel the world using Zoom Airlines. So that's how it's changed my life. I think it's also changed in the sense that I feel like I now have a voice to kind of speak out about a lot of these things. And I know sometimes as students, we feel like we almost feel voiceless. So I think it's so important that I feel like I have a voice, and not only myself, I feel like I've given so many other students a voice as well. I think a lot of the times I see students in the UK almost suffering at the hands of this social hierarchy, but with Mind the Gap and the work that I've done, I hope we will be able to see many other projects which are similar, tackling things such as race, sexism, sexuality, and hopefully they can all be student-led, because I think some of the greatest things in this world today all came from students at a time. So if we look at things such as Facebook, Uber, the whole lot. So as students, we're more powerful than you think.
And so our last question is, what continues to inspire you to become a doctor?
I think what continues to inspire me is being, like, knowing I'm in a position to help people and impact people's lives day to day. I think with Mind the Gap, what continues to help me going is to know that Mind the Gap also potentially saves someone's life somewhere out there in the world. And I probably will never meet them, and I probably will never see them. However, as a result of Mind the Gap, they were able to get better care, and maybe they are living today when they may have lost their lives at the hands of some of those statistics which we saw earlier on in my PowerPoint. So that's currently what keeps me going, just knowing that you can still make a change even if you're not in that place. You can still impact someone's life.
Well, we would all just like to thank you. This has been very inspiring, and we hope to be able to communicate this with people throughout our careers as well. Scott right now is putting up a screen just to look at some social media for everyone. If you want to follow social medias of different SOMAs and things like that, and obviously Malone's social media accounts. Thank you again, Malone, and thank you everyone for attending today. And we'll be reaching out afterwards with follow-up materials or anything we get. We'll be sure to send that out to everyone. So thank you.
Thank you.